everyone, it's Jack from Cultaholic.com, and it's time to talk about AEW Dynamite week number 3. Now, how good was this show? I enjoyed it. It was an enjoyable show for certain, but I do have to point out that there were several mistakes pretty much all the way throughout the show that had WWE made them, people would be absolutely rinsing them for it. So I'm not going to be, biased. I'm going to call it down the middle, as it were, and just talk about the bad side of the show as well as the good side. But how good was the show overall? There's only one way to find out, and that is by assigning each individual segment a lovely individual grade. That's right, it's time for AEW Dynamite Graded. We start the show with action from the tag team tournament, SCU versus the Best Friends. Originally, it's meant to be Christopher Daniels and Frankie Kazarian, but they get jumped on the ramp during their entrance by those sneaky Lucha brothers. Pentagon hits a package piledriver on Daniels on the ramp, which looks really nasty, but in a good way. And then it looks like Phoenix is going to do the same to Kazarian, but he has to wait a little bit, and everyone's like, what's he waiting for? And eventually, it's revealed why he's actually waiting, because he's never meant to hit the move on him, as Scorpio Skye comes hurtling down the ramp a little bit too late and stops it from happening, but Daniels is totally out of commission. Daniels gets carted off by the medical team, and basically Scorpio Skye inserts himself into the match. He says, look, the match hasn't started yet. I'm going to represent SCU now in the tournament. So it's now Scorpio Skye and Frankie Kazarian against Chuck Taylor and Trent Beretta. It seems a little bit as though Best Friends are working heel in this match, at least I guess de facto heels, because both teams are baby faces, but it's never really been above the Best Friends, certainly Chuck Taylor, to bend the rules here and there throughout his career. He's always been a bit of a heel at heart, hasn't he? This is exemplified in the spot where he takes off one of Scorpio Sky's shoes, one of his Adidas. All the Americans right now are going, Adidas, what's that? It's our word for Adidas. And he just hurls it down the ramp and then bites the toes of Scorpio Sky. The point is that Scorpio Sky hasn't had time to change into his ring gear because he was a last-minute replacement in the match. It all makes sense. It's all really exciting stuff. The crowd come alive when Scorpio Sky gets the hot tag a little bit later on and starts just running wild. In fact, the crowd are hot for pretty much all of this match. They're a really hot crowd. It is, of course, Philadelphia, Pennsylvania, and Scorpio Sky really feeds off that. And a lot of people were saying after this match, actually, that Scorpio Sky, despite his age, could well be a breakout singles star in AEW, and I certainly wouldn't be against that after watching not only how great he is in the ring, which we all knew, but also how charismatic he can be in a non-promo sense. He's charismatic on the mic too, but there's a certain in-ring physical charisma that certain wrestlers have, and Scorpio Sky is definitely one of them. At one point, he's so excited that he takes off his other shoe and throws it into the crowd, and everyone just pops huge, and then they pop even bigger when the shoe gets thrown back. Not in a, this is Philadelphia, but it's not in a sort of, you're John Cena and we hate you way. It's more in a, this is a good match and we're all having a great time sort of way. It's lovely, it's friendly, it's fun. It sounds like a perfect match from the way I've described it, but it's actually not. There are a few little mistakes here and there, as I mentioned in the intro, that had WWE made them, I think everybody would come down pretty hard on them. So I'm going to have to mention them here as well. It all concerns the finish, really, for me. Kazarian at one point tags himself in from the apron, which I'm not sure if that's allowed or not, actually. I don't know if that's allowed, but he stood on the apron. Scorpio Sky's in the right position. They just tag each other basically side by side on the apron, and then Kazarian gets in. They blast one of the Best Friends, I think it was Chuck Taylor, with a double team finisher, the powerbomb into the drop kick, and it's sloppy. It's not a clean finish at all. I guess you can understand because Scorpio Sky is not really wearing shoes at this point, but the drop kick is a little bit mistimed. And then the wrong man covers him. The illegal man, Scorpio Sky, makes the pinfall, and it gets the 3 count, which kind of took the shine off. A really exciting opener for me. Yeah, this gets a B grade. It would have got a B plus or maybe even an A minus because it was a really exciting match, really hot crowd, but there were a few little sloppy moments. The wrong guys going for the pinfall attempts and that sort of thing. And the most egregious one being, of course, that final pinfall attempt where Scorpio Sky really shouldn't have made the pinfall. Next up, more tag team action as Santana and Ortiz, members, of course, of Chris Jericho's Inner Circle, taking on the Beaver Boys, John Silver and Alex Reynolds. You might be familiar with them if you're a fan of Evolve or Beyond Wrestling, or if you watched SmackDown a month ago and really enjoyed them when they were getting squashed by Heavy Machinery. I know I certainly was. This is a really short match, but it's not a total squash. I'd call it an extended squash. It lasts a couple of minutes, and I think that was the right call. Rather than just a lightning fast victory for Santana and Ortiz, it's a good chance for them to demonstrate a lot of their moveset, a lot of their signature spots, and also to demonstrate how vicious and sadistic they can be as well, because of course, they're naughty heels. It ends with the street sweeper, which is kind of a powerbomb blockbuster double team move, and again, the wrong man makes the pinfall, Santana covering his opponent when it should have been Ortiz who was the legal man. The pair celebrate on the ramp, and then Jericho appears on the Titantron and cuts a promo basically saying, "Well done boys, you're really, really good. Everyone look how good my friends are at wrestling." And then Jericho lays out a challenge for the Young Bucks to take on Santana and Ortiz. At least I think that's what happened, because it was kind of hard to hear because Ortiz was spending the whole promo just shouting at the crowd, which did kind of make it hard to hear what Jericho was saying, but on the positive side, it was really, really funny. This gets a B-. Often it's pretty hard to give squash matches a bit of a high grade just because there's not much to grade it on, but this was about as good as it could have been. Apart from the finish, can we make sure that the legal man is making the pinfall, please? Next up, we get a video package, another beautifully shot and edited video package, which basically details Cody's journey to this title shot against Chris Jericho. It features interviews with Brandy saying like, "I knew when Cody, wanted to go for the title that we'd lose him for the next few weeks. He'd be so focused, he's so passionate." And it really does help build Cody up once again as probably the biggest babyface in AEW. All the shots are great, everything they use in the video package is great, all the little promo bits and the talking head segments and everything, it all comes together really nicely. And AEW, when they want to, really do excel in video production. But there's one minor thing that I do have to criticize it for. That would be DDP, who it was nice to see appear in the video, but who did say something a bit strange. He talked about how Dusty Rhodes used to say that there's always a hole inside you. You always feel empty until you win that first world title, and that's exactly how Cody's going to be feeling now. Is it? Because that's former Ring of Honor World Champion Cody Rhodes and former NWA World Heavyweight Champion Cody Rhodes. I get that you want to make your own title seem important, but one thing I like about AEW is that they haven't really shied away from acknowledging that a wider wrestling world exists outside of their product, and I thought that was a bit of a strange choice to have Diamond Dallas Page say that. It wasn't a huge mistake though, and that's why the overall grade for this video package is a B+. Why not more if I loved it so much? Well, I just have to disagree with it airing on this particular episode of AEW Dynamite. The reason for this is that they're not just building up to Cody having a shot at the AEW World Championship, they're explicitly building up to Cody taking on Chris Jericho for the AEW World Championship. And for me, that just took me a little bit out of the main event later on, Darby Allin's shot at Chris Jericho for the AEW World Championship. And I think all of us know that Darby Allin doesn't really stand much of a chance in that match of winning the title on the first defense for Chris Jericho, but at the same time, I just would have waited a week until I put this video package out. I would have kept it a little bit more realistic in the main event. Next up, the first defense for Riho, the AEW Women's World Champion, taking on Dr. Britt Baker, DMD. Now, this wasn't the smoothest match on the show, but personally, I don't think it was as bad as many people online were making out. I think as soon as this match happened, or kind of during and after the match, there was a lot of criticism on Twitter and Reddit and those sort of places for Britt Baker. A lot of people calling her green and sloppy, and watching this match, I don't think it was particularly bad at all. There were a few little miscommunications and little slow periods while they tried to figure each other out, but at the same time, I think that they kept a really good storyline going throughout the match, and I thought that Riho in particular was excellent all the way through. And I don't think it was that bad a performance by Britt Baker. I just think there were, as I say, one or two little moments where there were mistakes. But for every, weak moment, there were a few strong moments as well to kind of counteract it. I thought that this match, again, as I say, had a really good sense of storytelling and psychology all the way through, with the larger Britt Baker taking on the smaller champion, but the champion had the experience advantage, which commentary really did a good job of playing up to. Basically, Riho got the win because Britt Baker was looking to lock in the lockjaw, her kind of Rings of Saturn mandible claw submission hold, which is really cool in my opinion, and Riho, having that experience edge, manages to roll her over into a flash pinfall predicament, and it's enough to get the 3 count. This gets a B grade, and in my mind it was kind of the opposite of the opening match, SCU versus the Best Friends, because that opening tag match had really good action all the way through, and then it was kind of ruined a little bit by the finish at the end. This one had imperfect action all the way through. There were mistakes here and there, but it was saved, I think, by an excellent finish. I really enjoyed the idea of Riho being in real danger and then managing to pull a pinfall out of nowhere to secure the victory and retain her title. Next up, more tag team tournament action. This was supposed to originally be Luchasaurus and Jungle Boy taking on the Lucha Brothers. But instead, thanks to an injury to Luchasaurus, and we hope he gets well soon, it's now Jungle Boy and Marko Stunt taking on Pentagon and Phoenix. This was a really fun match in my opinion. I saw a lot of people suggesting that it should have been shorter and that basically Penta and Phoenix should have put away the guys opposite them in pretty short order, but I don't think it went too long at all. It went about 10 minutes and I thought that was enough time to both put over Jungle Boy and Marko Stunt as resilient underdogs, but also establish Phoenix and Pentagon as dangerous opponents in this tournament. And really, I don't understand what the issue is with Marko Stunt not looking strong. He's not, dishing out punishment left, right and center like Luchasaurus does to the Lucha Bros, but I don't have a problem with him looking resilient, and I certainly don't have a problem with Jungle Boy looking resilient because I think he is potentially a breakout star of the future. What I do have an issue with is the finish, which is a real shame because I did really enjoy this match throughout until the very, very end. But the mistake made at the end of this match was worse than the ones at the start of the show with the illegal man getting the pinfall. This was pretty bad. Phoenix running across the ring and tagging in Pentagon for the finishing sequence. But Penta wasn't even on the apron, he was just stood in the corner. And as Phoenix made the tag and as the referee went, yes, tag, you saw a few guys in the front row of the crowd just going like, what? But anyway, the finishing sequence continued. Penta broke Marko Stunt's arm, or at least, dislocated it. I hope they play up to that in future weeks. I hope they make that an injury that takes a toll on Marko Stunt going forwards. And then they hit a double team finisher and pin Marko Stunt. It was Pentagon who pinned, the right man pinned him. It's just that he tagged in from within the inside of the ring. But yeah, the Lucha Brothers win, which is the right call, but I don't have any real issues with Jurassic Express, that's the name, looking strong as a result of the defeat. This gets a B grade. Again, it should have been a higher grade, but again, the finish was something that really detracted from the overall grade of the match for me. And again, I do want to stress what I said in the intro. If we saw that exact mistake happen on Monday Night Raw, I think everyone will be coming down much harder on it, and I do have to keep things fair on graded. This is a classroom, damn it. Next up, more tag team action, but this one featuring 4 singles stars really. It's Pac and Jon Moxley taking on Hangman Adam Page and Kenny Omega. This was one of the best things on the show, maybe even my favourite match of the entire night, just because all 4 men have been at each other's throats recently, and there was a lot of intensity funneled into this match. It was really effective. One of the biggest moments came after Hangman Page got a hot tag and was running wild, and commentary are like raving about how good he is. Then he gets on the top rope and Pac distracts him. Pac's the illegal man at this point from the corner. He distracts him. Hangman Page pauses and jaws at him because they hate each other, and that gives Moxley enough of a chance to just shove Hangman Page off the top rope, and he takes a risky bump on the apron, flipping forwards, landing back first on the apron. But even though it was dangerous, I think he took it about as well as he could have done. The most exciting moment of the match, I think, comes when Omega and Moxley finally face off in the ring. They're clearly itching to go at one another at full gear, and everyone's really excited for that match as well. And it seems like they've got a really good chemistry. They're zipping around the ring, hitting each other with big moves, and it's just really fun to watch. But it doesn't last too long before storyline gets in the way, and that's not a bad thing. I love stories. Both men head to the outside and retrieve the weapons that we saw them hold last week. Moxley's got that barbed wire baseball bat. Omega's got that barbed wire broomstick. They get in the ring, it looks like they're going to go at each other, but Bryce Remsburg, the referee, goes, "Stop it, lads," and Moxley just goes, "What?" and Bryce runs out of the ring to the outside, which is great, because referees are humans too. They're part of this universe, and it's great, because if Jon Moxley was holding barbed wire and shouted at me, I'd also, run out of the ring. But before Omega and Moxley can do any real damage to each other, Pac gets in the ring and stops Moxley and becomes my favourite member of the AEW roster, because he's got logic, he understands the show. He's going, "Don't do that, we'll literally get disqualified, our records won't be as good, and I'm not going to get a title shot in the near future." He doesn't say it, verbatim like that, but you can just tell from his acting, from his emotions, that that's exactly what he meant. It was a really good display of in-ring storytelling from War Geordie Neville. But Moxley, of course, doesn't take too kindly to this, just drops Pac with the paradigm shift and leaves. He just walks out, leaving it 2-on-1, and of course from there, it's a pretty straightforward victory for Omega and Hangman Page. Page hits the buckshot lariat, Omega hits the V-trigger, and then Page hits the Deadeye, and they pick up a lovely victory. This gets an A-. It was really, really fun. I really enjoyed this match. I thought that not only was the action good and intense, but also it felt like a showcase New Japan tag match in a way, in that, rather than it being tag teams, it featured 4 singles wrestlers predominantly, and it built up to a huge future match in Jon Moxley and Kenny Omega. In fact, it built up to 2 huge future matches, because they've announced Moxley versus Pac for next week. I also really liked how consistent the characters were here. Pac last week talked about how good his record was and how he can't believe that he hasn't got a title shot yet. And in this match, he was really concerned with protecting that record, not getting DQ'd by his wild tag team partner. And then Moxley also was just very John Moxley about the whole thing, doing what he wants in kind of Steve Austin fashion, dropping his own partner with his finisher and just walking out of the ring. And finally, we get the main event of the night, the AEW World Title match between the champion Chris Jericho and the challenger Darby Allin in a Philadelphia street fight. Darby's really pushed the boat out for this one. I like when a wrestler has a title match and they do something different with their attire or their entrance, or just change it up slightly to let you know, right, we've hit a new level here. Darby Allin had a custom skateboard with like champ written on it. He's got the word champ written all across his body paint, which is reminiscent of one of the first feuds that made me really sit up and pay attention to Darby Allin back in Evolve, which I think was his feud with Zack Sabre Jr., where he actually got the word champ tattooed like in his, you know, in his inner lip, in his bottom lip, which looks painful, and also he didn't win. So I don't know if that's a real tattoo. I hope it wasn't, but fair play to you, Darby, for the commitment to the cause. Great character work. Don't get a tattoo there if you've not got a high threshold of pain. Allin starts off this match really hot, just throwing everything he's got at Jericho, which is the entirely right way to go about this match. But Jericho, the wily veteran, keeps cutting him off, so eventually they raise the stakes. Darby gets weapons involved. They use a kendo stick, they use a chair. It's all going very nicely. On one or two occasions, Jericho catches Darby Allin in the walls of Jericho, but Darby bravely makes the ropes. And this is where I have one of my issues with this match, actually. Commentary established before the bout started that rope breaks were allowed. That's totally fine. I'm glad that they made that rule clear. But my issue is with the referee counting to 5 to try and get Jericho to break the hold after he's kept it clamped on. My issue is, what's the point in that? Because, you know, it's a street fight. What are you going to do? Disqualify him for not breaking the hold? I get that he should break the hold and it's a heelish thing to do, but this seems to be a theme. I think I remember Jericho doing this maybe in that match with Kenny Omega in New Japan. Again, that was a no DQ match, and once again he kept that hold locked on and the referee threatened to disqualify him. It's not the ideal situation for a match with a no DQ stipulation. Luckily though, the crowd kind of forgive the match because it gets really intense from here on out. Jericho duct tapes Darby Allin's hands together behind his back, and Darby Allin just goes to town without using his hands. He hits a lion salt with no hands, he hits a suicide dive with no hands, he hits some kind of like Jeff Hardy style corkscrew from the top rope as well, head first. It's awesome. He's amazing. I think he's absolutely fantastic, and I'd love to see him, like Jungle Boy, as a future star of AEW. But Jericho survives this no-handed onslaught and powerbombs Darby Allin onto his own skateboard, which must have sucked. And then later on, Darby Allin's kind of regained control. He heads up top for the coffin drop, his finisher, but he gets punched in the face by an interfering Jake Hager. Allin falls back into the ring, Jericho takes both of his legs, locks in the walls of Jericho, and Darby Allin has to verbally submit because his hands are still tied together behind his back. And the rest of the Inner Circle come out and close the show, celebrating with Chris Jericho with a little bit of the with a lot of the bubbly actually. There are quite a lot of champagne bottles in that ring. This gets a B+. I wanted to love this match and I really wanted to give it a higher grade, but there were two issues. The first one is what I've already talked about, the referee threatening to DQ Jericho in a no DQ match, which the crowd actually responded to, chanting, "It's a street fight" at the poor referee. She's only doing her job. My other problem with the match though concerns the finish. Given Darby Allin's character, and I'm fully aware that Jericho should have won this match and it's right that he did, but given Darby Allin's character, couldn't Jericho have pinned him instead of submitting him? Because Darby Allin's whole thing is that he doesn't care about pain, he doesn't care about self-preservation, he's reckless, he's wild, and he'll do whatever it takes to win. I know that with his hands duct taped behind his back, it might have been hard to get both of his shoulders down for a 3 count, but at some point towards the finish, you could have had him rip free or maybe get a tool involved and somehow free himself from the duct tape. Instead, we had him submitting to the walls of Jericho, which really goes against, I think, the fabric of his character. And overall, this week's AEW Dynamite, well, it's a really, really difficult show to grade, isn't it? Because I thought the action was pretty much great from start to finish. I thought the storytelling was excellent, largely from start to finish as well. But there were a few little mistakes, weren't there? A lot of the finishes of these matches were imperfect in one way or another. And once again, for the final time, I swear, it's the last time I'll say it, but just to hammer this home so I don't get slated for not enjoying this show as much as many of you did, I think if WWE made these mistakes, people would hammer them a lot heavier. I mean, I didn't see many of these mistakes even on the front page of Squared Circle on Reddit. And I think that a lot of them were quite blatant and quite obvious. In fact, during that Ortiz and Santana tag match, apparently, I haven't been able to find it myself, but apparently JR just said, "Oh yeah, remember, we've got to get this over. I just forgot that he was on live TV. Maybe he thought they were in a commercial break or something. It's these sort of mistakes that if WWE made them, everyone would hate it a lot more than with AEW. And I get that AEW are the company with a lot more goodwill right now because of what they're doing, and that's great. But at the same time, I'd like to see those mistakes tidied up. For that reason, I'm only going to give this show a B+. I still really enjoyed it. I thought that a lot of the action and storytelling was brilliant, but there were some imperfections here and there. Thanks very much for watching, and let us know what you think in the comments section down below. You can follow Cultaholic on Twitter at Cultaholic and on Facebook at facebook.com/Cultaholic. If you enjoy what we do, then please do check out our Patreon, patreon.com/Cultaholic, where you can pledge. And don't forget, of course, most importantly of all, to hit subscribe and to join us.